As someone who loves hunting hard achievements in video games, and does it professionally, I guess, it still feels kinda weird to say that even 2 years later, I've come across some pretty difficult ones, and against my better judgment, made some hard ones even harder. So today, I wanted to rank each of the achievements, challenges, and achievement challenges I've done over the past year to give you an idea of how hard each of them are, and if it's something I'd recommend you try yourself. Most of the things on the tier list are things that I've covered on the channel, but since this is my hobby for some reason, a few of them are gonna be ones that I unlocked on my own time, and others are going to be ones that are about to be turned into videos. Since I want to make this a yearly thing too, I've also taken a few of the entries I made in last year's tier list and pre-placed them to give you an idea of how this year's slate of games stack up. And if you're at all curious why I ranked these where I did, then make sure to check out that video after this one. But to give you an idea of the difficulty to expect from each tier, D tier contains 7-Day Survivor from Dead Rising and Impossible Mode from the Dead Space remake. C tier contains beating Gears 1 and 2 solo on insane difficulty. B tier has the Mile High Club and beating every campaign solo on Expert from Left 4 Dead. A tier contains Akumu mode from The Evil Within, which for those that don't know is the difficulty where you die in one hit, and Pantheon 5 from Hollow Knight. And finally, S tier contains every campaign in Left 4 Dead 2 on solo Expert realism. That's pretty much what we're working with here, and I think it makes sense to start the list with the game I finished after I ranked all these. Dishonored 2 is a game you can play in so many different ways, and since it's such an amazing immersive sim, it only makes sense that the devs would create hard achievements based around that fact. There's an achievement for beating the game without ever being seen, there's another for never killing an enemy, and one where you're not allowed to use your powers for the entire playthrough. I decided to do all three at the same time. This run is not a good time. I basically had to find ways to avoid literally everything during each level, and I couldn't use stuff like teleporting or freezing time in the non-creepy way that would have been really helpful with getting past most of the enemies. Then I also had to neutralize my target in each level with the non-lethal method, which normally takes more time and effort to set up, and obviously means there were more chances for me to be seen. So with all that being said, C tier. This was a giant pain in the ass for sure, but one thing saved this achievement challenge from being ungodly difficult, and that was save scumming, baby. Dishonored 2 lets you save at any point during a level, which meant that whenever I had to get through a dicey situation, and trust me, there were a lot of them, I could just pop a save and take as many attempts as I needed. Now, even then, there were some sections like in Jindosh Mansion's second floor where I genuinely thought that getting all 3 achievements at once was, without exaggeration, impossible. And because of that, this is still very much worthy of being called hard. But at least when I failed, I didn't have to restart the mission, or God forbid, the entire game. Wait, actually, that sounds like a banger idea. I also wouldn't recommend you do this either, because taking away too many things at once kind of ruins the fun of the game, and it'd be way more enjoyable if you did a stealth no-kill playthrough, then a no-powers playthrough after, to really appreciate everything the game has to offer. And so, this'll stay at a solid C tier next to the 2 Gears games. Speaking of Gears, Gears eat a, Gears eat a, Gears eat a, Gears eat a, Gears eat a. Okay, now that I have the YouTube algorithm on my side, Gears of War 3, of course, is the finale to the original Gears trilogy, and the hardest achievement in this game, of course, is Seriously 3.0. The thing is, grinding with AI for 300 hours doesn't sound that fun unless you're a very lonely tech bro. So I decided to cover the more skill-based achievement, which was for completing the campaign on Insane. Just like in Gears 1 and 2, I did this completely solo as well, but unlike Gears 1 and 2, this was supposed to be the hardest in the trilogy, and after doing it myself, I completely agree with that sentiment. So where does this go on the tier list? I don't know what you expected. While this is without a doubt the most difficult of the Gears trilogy to complete on Insane, it's still just Gears. If you've done 1 and 2, you kinda already know what to expect. Most of the time, you'll get through the game dying occasionally, and then there will be some parts that spike in difficulty, and you'll die 10 shitloads of times. Gears 3 probably has the most of these sections out of all the games, and in my opinion, the Armored Cantus and Final Boss blow anything the first 2 games had out of the water, other than maybe ROM. But I also don't think it's enough for this achievement to go higher than C tier. Also, I would absolutely recommend doing this either solo or with a friend, because it's a reasonable reasonable challenge, and it gives you an excuse to play more gears. Now, hopefully you've been enjoying listening to me yap, just like I enjoy listening to myself yap too, because my ego is through the roof. And if you're at all curious how I've been listening to myself, YouTube, podcasts, and the like, then look no further than Raycon's everyday earbuds, where my yapping has somehow also convinced them to sponsor today's video. Raycon earbuds are great because they give you basically the same audio quality you'd expect from bigger brands, but at a fraction of the price. And now's the best time to look into them, as they've just launched the upgraded model of their best-selling everyday earbuds. These bad boys are IP66 weatherproofed, sweat-resistant, and have an ergonomic design to comfortably fit into the widest range of ears, which has been great for me personally, since one of my deepest nightmares is having my earbuds slip out and fall into a random drainage gutter. That and Silksong being delayed indefinitely. Gosh, this stream's been going on for a really long time now. They also have an active noise cancellation feature if you really want to get into whatever you're listening to, and an awareness mode in case you need to keep an ear out for the important things in life, like your number being called out at the takeout place. My brother has actually been using Raycons for years and swears by them, and ever since I got a pair, I completely see why. So if you're looking for a great set of earbuds at an affordable price, then click on the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/Snamwiches to get 15% off your purchase plus free shipping. Thank you again to Raycon for supporting the channel, and now back to me painfully reliving the memories of my hardest achievements. With Alan Wake 2 on the horizon, which banger game by the way, I thought it'd be fun to revisit the first game and try and attempt its hardest achievement. The problem is that it's really easy. Nightmare mode pretty much just makes you weaker and the enemies stronger, but considering that's basically all the difficulty does, the nightmare in nightmare mode isn't really much more than a dream about you ripping your pants or something. So I took it upon myself to do an Akumu mode-like challenge on top of it, where if I took a hit at all, I'd have to reset to the last checkpoint manually. The problem is that it's really easy. Even though I wasn't allowed to take damage, the basic mechanics of this game made it really simple to get into the flow of things, and there weren't that many curveballs or difficult parts that resulted in errant hits. The initial learning phase was rough, and there were parts here and there where I had to reset multiple times, but all in all, even dying in one hit wasn't enough to stop this from being really easy. So I'm throwing Alan Wakumu mode in D tier and normal nightmare difficulty into fucking E tier, I don't know. Also, I'd recommend it, it's pretty fun. But now it's time to get to something a bit more challenging. I hate that we now live in a world where we'll never get The Evil Within 3, and that's because the first two games are really special. Last year, I completed Akumu mode in The Evil Within 1 and stand by the fact that it is the most fun way to play the game. This is not a joke, by the way, I genuinely believe that for some reason. The Evil Within 2 also has a special mode for an achievement called Classic Mode, where enemies are stronger, there are no upgrades, and you only get 7 saves for the entire playthrough. And it is tough. You're constantly filled with stress and adrenaline trying to plan out your saves and not lose 3 hours of progress to a guy with a flamethrower angry at the world for making him bald. And I mean, I would be too. That, plus the amount of skill I feel is required to beat the tankier enemies of this mode, makes this the first B tier difficulty achievement of the list. Not as hard as Akumu mode from the first game, but it had some moments like the Stefano fight, Hot Dude Hangout, and more to make this a challenge in and of its own. I'd recommend going for it too. And although I wouldn't go as far as to say it's the best way to play this game, it's still a super satisfying achievement to accomplish. I kinda ran out of clever transition phrases. My bad. The Metro games all have a difficulty in them with an achievement tied to it called Ranger Hardcore, which makes it so that you die really fast, find way less resources, and it can even limit your heads up display if you so choose. Metro Exodus is no different, except in this entry, you have an entire semi-open world to explore. It's filled with raiders that are really good at killing you, creatures that are really good at killing you, and also, don't talk to me about the gorillas. I still get flashbacks to the stupid gorillas. The thing is, the fact that it's open world ends up making this difficulty a lot easier. You can safely run or drive past a bunch of the more dangerous things, and even when you do have a mandatory linear section, the stealth in this game works well enough for you to sneak through a large amount of encounters in their entirety. Therefore, I think if you're just focused on getting the achievement as soon as possible, then this is also D tier. However, I would also recommend you do it and not rush through, because Ranger Hardcore is a really fun additional challenge, and I think it's the best way to play the game. Wait, that would have been a great transition phrase for earlier. Hold on. And although I wouldn't go as far as to say it's the best way to play this game, it's still a super satisfying achievement to accomplish. But you know what is the best way to play the game? Banger. Yippee. Permadeath. The hardest achievement in Outlast is unsurprisingly the Energizer achievement, which requires you to beat the entire game in one life without reloading the battery in your night vision camera. Outlast has a lot of sections that pretty much have no lighting whatsoever, which I sometimes really appreciated for the sake of the YouTube video, but because of that, you'll basically have to commit entire room layouts to memory just so you don't use up all the camera battery before the end game. Then there's the problem of the enemies that instantly kill you and your death resulting in you having to start the entire game over. This is such an intimidating achievement, in fact, that only 0.1% of people that have played it on Xbox have ever gotten it. And it is the biggest case of fraud in human history. This game is like 2 hours long. It's not that bad. If you're familiar with the game, you can make up the progress from failed runs in no time. And I think in total, it took me like 5.5 hours to do without looking up strategies and learning the game myself. I was gonna cover the same achievement for the DLC too, but I can't because I beat it first try and the video would have been super boring. So this goes in about mid-C tier for me, and I wouldn't recommend it. Not because I didn't like it, because I personally thought it was really fun learning strategies on the fly and having more stakes than the main game, but because I don't want the achievement percentage to rise so I can still brag about my super rare achievement that's actually super easy. Please don't ruin this for me. That being said, you know what's not easy though? This past year, I decided that I'd finally try to complete the entire Master Chief Collection, which for those that don't know, has 700 achievements. So far, I'm at something like 640, but in order to get every achievement in the game, I'd also need to get the hardest achievement, which is to complete every game in the collection on Lasso. Lasso, to put it simply, means beating the game on the hardest difficulty, but with extra modifiers that make the game harder. And the first one I decided to tackle was the one in Halo Reach. This was really hard. This was my first Lasso ever that didn't involve the invisible tank gun from Infinite, so I really had no idea what to expect, and holy shit, it was even worse than I could have imagined. Especially since you don't get a cowboy hat or a rope, like talk about false advertising. Immediately in Mission 1, we got soft locks 90 minutes in. In Mission 3, we had to suffer through hours of getting stuck on one of the more difficult parts because we were stupid and didn't realize we could skip it. And around Mission 5, when we did start looking up strategies, it really didn't make it that much easier. Unless you normally get a very strong sense of satisfaction for completing insane challenges like I do, or have a good co-op partner to banter with, I honestly can't recommend it. It really just crushes you. Some of the missions also go on for so long that your brain just feels like it's melting as you die to a singular grunt for like the 5th time in a row. And for that reason, Halo Reach goes on the tippy top of A tier. Harder than stuff like Akumu, but just missing out on that coveted S tier. And that's because the next Lasso is even harder. Halo 2's Lasso is supposedly the hardest one in the MCC, and in a sick way, I'm kind of looking forward to taking it on after I finish the other 5 games. But the one Lasso that people put anywhere close to the same level, and a small portion even think is harder than Halo 2's, is Halo 1's. And yeah, I can totally see that. I think compared to Reach, this campaign has levels that are way easier, but also levels that were raised from the lowest depths of hell to punish our souls for even thinking that we had the right to dream about beating them, or something along those lines. For every level you can skip entirely with a cool trick, there's levels like TNR, 2 betrayals in the library that can realistically take up to 4 hours. And that's when you reach the Bone Zone, where you can disconnect from the servers due to your session taking too long and have to restart the entire level again from the beginning thanks to the game's janky ass servers. And for those reasons, I'm giving Halo 1's Lasso the first S tier of the video. But it's not gonna be the last. And my recommendation for this achievement also stays the same. Unless you're a masochist or have someone that can help you laugh through the pain, you probably want to stay away from this. Limbo is a sadistic torture device hidden behind the appearance of a 2D puzzle platformer. For its hardest achievement, you have to complete the game in 5 deaths or less, and considering all the things that can kill you, you're probably gonna need every extra life the game's willing to offer. You'll basically need to learn the game from the inside out, since traps sometimes appear out of nowhere and there are some incredibly tricky jumps with super tight timing windows. It honestly feels like there was a buy one get 500 bear trap sale at the Bass Pro Shop Pyramid in Tennessee, and someone placed all of them in this game. The one saving grace though is just like Outlast, this game is super short. So realistically, it shouldn't be the worst thing ever unless you're a serial choker just like me. I'm gonna put it in B tier since it gets pretty stressful and you do have to learn more complicated things than run around a room better. But it's at the very bottom, just touching C. Also, learning the run from scratch is very fun and very rewarding. So it's something I'd recommend trying out, especially since all the other achievements in the game are super easy aside from this one. And that's actually the case in another game. I wouldn't consider Spec Ops The Line an underrated game, since I feel like whenever it's brought up in conversations, it's always given the flowers it deserves, but I do think it's an under-talked about game. So in the spirit of that, it's basically like doing Gears of War again, so Gears tier. Moving on. Okay, in all seriousness though, the hardest achievement is just for beating the game on its highest difficulty. And although there are some tough sections, there's not much that's actually god-awful. In terms of recommending it though, I think you're mainly coming to Spec Ops for the story and not so much the gameplay. So I don't think it's worth getting annoyed during the sometimes unfair sections in between cutscenes that'll just serve to sour your opinion on the game. So yeah, Gears tier. But you know what's not in Gears tier? Plot twist, motherfuckers! They actually made a hard Gears game! To be fair though, the hardest achievement in Judgment is a bit more involved than usual. In order to get the Superstar achievement, not only do you have to beat the game on Insane like the other 3 entries, but you also have to score enough points in each level to obtain a 3-star rank. This is done by getting extra headshots, ribbons, and the like, but you'll also basically be required to accept the optional objectives in each of the missions as well that end up making the normally hard missions even harder. The difficulty of these can vary, but usually for every Charmin Ultra Soft objective, there's another that makes you feel like you're slowly being pulled apart by a medieval torture device, or worse, makes you feel like a Dallas Cowboys fan. I specifically remember 3 missions in this game that blew anything difficult the OG trilogy had to offer out of the water, and for that reason, I'm putting it in B tier. I would put it higher, but at the end of the day, it's still Gears with a step up in difficulty, and I don't think it quite reaches what A tier has to offer. Recommending it is kinda hard too, since I feel as though the whole 3-star system really doesn't add a lot to the game and will really only make some things more annoying than make anything feel more satisfying. So I wouldn't recommend it unless you're already a Gears fan and really want to test your skill. Dead Space 3's permadeath mode is kind of a tricky achievement to rank on here. On one hand, it has the easiest combat in the series since you can just rush to craft the most stupidly overpowered weapon in existence that can shoot out 10 trillion mini rockets, or the Necromorph's mothers to tell them how disappointed they are in their life choices. But on the other hand, it's permadeath. And this game fucking blows sometimes. It's really just 9 straight hours of hoping the game doesn't shaft you in some way. And that makes it one of the most stressful things I've ever done. I can't tell you how many times I've had to climb this stupid ice wall or go through this dumb flying section where my ass clenched so hard that my entire chair was swallowed whole. And that's not even scratching the surface of all the parts in this game that can instantly kill you if an object gets within 2 feet of Isaac. And I mean that literally. I still haven't forgiven that cheap-ass ice wall death 5 hours in. All in all, this run is really not that bad on paper, but since it's so mentally taxing when you die, even when you do everything right, I can't justify putting this anywhere other than low A tier. Oh, and in case you didn't pick up my absolute disdain for this achievement, I would not recommend it. Although that being said, I feel as though everyone should at least experience a run dying to the ice wall once in their lives, because it really changes you as a person. Also, some of you may have noticed that there's been a pretty glaring omission in the tier list so far. That changes now. I said previously that this Alien Isolation Nightmare Permadeath Challenge is the hardest thing I've ever done in a video game, and to this day, I stand by that statement completely. For those that don't know, the hardest achievement in the game is for completing its 12 to 15 hour story without ever dying, and thankfully you can do this on any difficulty you'd like. But since I'd already done this achievement before, I decided that it'd be fun to try it out on its hardest difficulty, Nightmare. And since I'm very stubborn and very stupid, I spent months attempting to complete it. A basic summary of Nightmare is that you're given practically nothing throughout the game, and all the enemies are way more intelligent with the ability to kill you instantly or in 2 hits at most. And this increases the amount of skill and luck needed immensely. When I did it on easy, I was actually able to wing it a lot of the time and have things work out. But putting it on Nightmare makes it so hard that you have to study the best strategies for every mission if you want a chance of succeeding. And it's not like Limbo or Outlast, where they're both pretty short and the only mechanics you have to worry about are jump and run, because Alien is at least 6 times as long and has so much more depth with all the different kinds of weapons and learning how the AI even works. The worst thing about it though is that there are so many things that can go wrong even if you play the game perfectly. And all the hardest parts are late in the game. So a majority of my runs, once I finally got good, would all end in chapters 14 to 17, which would usually be about 4 or so hours down the drain each time. This challenge is still my proudest accomplishment to date, and because of that, it has the honor. Actually, honor probably isn't the right word here. It has the infamy of going into the brand new S+ tier, because I truly believe that it is that much harder than everything else. To reiterate, by the way, Hollow Knight Pantheon 5 is in A tier. This is 2 tiers above that. I have a permadeath bias, and I am not about to apologize for it. Also, while I wouldn't recommend doing the Nightmare permadeath run, I would say that getting the permadeath achievement normally on whatever lower difficulty you want is very fun. And I would wholeheartedly recommend getting back shots from the alien until you beat it. This is one of my top 10 games of all time, and it's probably the reason I was able to keep chipping away at it for as long as I did. But with all the online achievements covered, let's talk about some offline ones. I love Brutal Legend, and I wanted to do a video on it so bad, just like how I really want to do a Guitar Hero video, but if I upload something with that much DMCA-able music in it to the channel, I unironically think YouTube would just gun me down in the street. Honestly though, it's probably for the best, since the achievement for beating the game on the hardest difficulty is actually really easy. For those that might not know, Brutal Legends is an open-world hack-and-slash game, but 2/3 of the boss fights turn the game into a full-blown RTS. The hack-and-slash parts give you a decent amount of health still, so I thought the RTS parts would be the ones that dumpstered me a bunch. Mainly because my monkey P brain already has a hard enough time stringing a coherent sentence together. But the bosses usually start their strategy in the same way every time, and it's pretty simple to adapt or cheese your way through it. I'm gonna put Brutal Legends Brutal difficulty in D tier, and I'd recommend it just so you have an excuse to play this game again on a slightly more challenging difficulty. Vanquish is the best 7 out of 10 game ever made, and I will not be taking any further questions. Getting to slide around and do slow-mo tricks in a super suit is awesome, and makes for one of the most fun and unique experiences you can find in a game. The same can't be said about its hardest achievement though. In a game where there's a highest difficulty achievement and a permadeath achievement, the hardest achievement in this game is actually for completing 6 tactical challenge missions that are separate from the main story. They throw basically everything the game's got at you all at once on the hardest difficulty. And from my experience, this is how it goes. Missions 1 through 3 are a bit tricky, but not too bad once you get some practice in. Mission 4 fucking sucks. Mission 5 is slightly better, but still sucks ass. And Mission 6 is one of the hardest things you'll do in a video game without question. Mastery of the game is critical here, because you'll die super fast, have to fight 3 boss level enemies, and at least in my successful attempt, it took me 20 minutes to finish, where one mistake could cost you everything. I spent a total of 8 hours on and off attempting this, trying to get my boost dodging better, optimizing my suit energy, and so on. And I did this for fun. The reason why this wasn't made into a video though is that a script that goes something like, yeah, so I spawned in and I died, so I spawned in again and killed an enemy, then died, and repeat that for 15 minutes isn't exactly the most interesting thing ever. Maybe if I decide to double stack it, I'll try to do this again bundled along with some of the other achievements in the game, but for now, the Tactical Challenger achievement in Vanquish goes in S tier. That pretty much wraps up the harder achievements I unlocked offline, mainly because when I'm gaming in my free time, it's kind of nice to do something easy once in a while, I don't know. But before I talk about future games, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for watching my stupid achievement and challenge videos. When I started YouTube 2 years ago, I never thought there'd be a world in which I had 300 subscribers, let alone 300,000 at this point. That's a fucking big number. And it genuinely makes me smile every day when I read comments or hang out with some of you during live streams, or just generally seeing people react positively to my videos on a topic that I'm immeasurably passionate about. So thank you to each and every one of you that do that. Also, shout out to my editor Plum. He has been editing these videos with me for the past year and has been a lifesaver as my life has gotten more busy. So a big portion of my success is absolutely attributed to him. Thank you, my guy. Speaking of future achievement videos, as of right now, I have 3 different playthroughs going on over on Twitch and 4 playthroughs already done and ready to be edited. Out of those 4, 2 of them are Resident Evil 6 and Back 4 Blood, and although I'm not going to rank these properly until I do this next year, I wanted to give you an idea of what to expect for the future. Out of the 4 already completed games I have in the vault, 1 of them will go in B tier, 1 of them will go in A tier, 1 of them will go in S tier, and the last one is something I genuinely feel is an S+ tier reaming. Next year is hopefully going to be a banger, and I'm really looking forward to sharing my mental stress with you all throughout it. Also, how did I end this video last year again? Wolfenstein 2, Super Meat Boy, Devil May Cry 5, I am coming for you this year, and I am going to win. Ah, right. This year for sure.